All right, so we're almost at the end of November, but November is Prematurity Awareness Month. So we thought we would take an opportunity to tell you guys a little bit more about our story about prematurity. You probably don't know, but Jaren and Tegan were born very, very early. Jaren and Tegan are twins. You probably do know that. But they were born at 25 weeks, which is almost 3 months early.
For a lot of you, you might not know what the weeks are. You usually hear people talk about the months of them being pregnant, but full term is 40 weeks. Usually you hear about 9 months being pregnant. If you do the math, 40 weeks would actually be 10 months. So I say, and I think we usually go by 9 months because the first month you don't even realize you're pregnant. By the time you find out you're pregnant, you have 9 more months to go. So 25 weeks would actually have made them only at 6 months gestation. So like Mitch said, that was 3 months, actually like 3.5 months early, which is like a really, really scary early.
Yeah.
Like,
so generally, I don't know, maybe it's a little bit different now, but they used to talk about 23 weeks is where the pregnancy is even considered viable. So we're just so to the point where they were going to give it a chance. So yeah, way too early. Jaren was 1 pound 14 ounces and Tegan was 1 pound 11 ounces when they were born, and I think they were only like 13 inches long. Yeah. Which isn't that short, but way too light for
like
for
there was
length.
nothing extra on
Right.
them at all.
Yeah.
But kind of like the backstory, the funny thing is, we found out that we were having twins at my 20-week ultrasound. So we didn't even know that we were having twins until my 20-week ultrasound. I should say I was pretty suspicious that we were having twins. Just because obviously Kaylin, I had that pregnancy to compare it to. And maybe we can show you pictures of the difference from, so when I went in for my prenatal appointments, we never heard 2 heartbeats because we never really searched for 2 heartbeats because I wasn't really showing a lot more at that point. So my last appointment probably would have been, well, I don't know. Anyway,
Yeah.
Once we went in for our 20-week ultrasound, was when we found out we were having twins. I remember saying to Mitch before we went to that, I asked him if he would be okay if they saw more than one baby on the ultrasound, because
She had a suspicion that it was more than one.
I was like, I popped out a lot sooner. I just feel like so much bigger at this point, and the baby just moves around a lot differently. Like, it wasn't crazy movements, it just was like, I feel movement here and then suddenly it's over here, and I just don't think one baby's like moving around that much.
Right.
So I did kind of give Mitch that heads up, but we never said that to anybody else. Like, we
Right.
never mentioned that to family, because I was like, yeah, people are gonna probably maybe think I'm a little crazy. I actually do have a twin sister. I am a fraternal twin. Obviously, these two are fraternal, being boy and girl. So when we found out at our 20-week ultrasound, I should say the ultrasound tech was kind of taking a little, I remember, Mitch, what were you saying? You're like, it looks like, it looked like he kept flipping or something back and forth.
Right. He was like, on the side, and then he go back
like
to the
he
side.
wasn't saying anything, and then all of a sudden he just held up 2 fingers.
Yeah, he just looked at us and was like.
And I think I kind of sat up and was just like, I knew it. And so we knew, we didn't want to find out the genders at all. So he did tell us that they were fraternal. So we knew that. So we knew our 3 options could be 2 boys, 2 girls, or a boy and a girl. So we had baby A, you were baby A, we had baby B. And when I told the ultrasound tech that I was a twin, when we went back for our next ultrasound at 24 weeks, he asked the radiologist if what's the probability of that? And they said, actually really high. Fraternal twins can easily have fraternal twins. So if you're watching this and you think that twins cannot have twins, or if it skips a generation, I don't think that's an actual fact. I think that's something that's made up. But anyway, so we had only found out at 20 weeks we were having twins, so we were very excited about this. I was actually feeling really good. I enjoyed pregnancy. My first pregnancy with Kaylin went really well. So I remember literally talking like the week that the twins were born, like the beginning of that week. A friend asking how I was feeling with twins, and I'm like, so far I feel great. And I was like, but I'm just starting my third trimester, so we'll see how that goes. So I can remember having that conversation like at the beginning of the week. They were actually born on a Thursday. So I really had not been like, I hadn't been feeling weird really at all. The
Right.
day
So up
of,
until this point, it was like pretty normal pregnancy. Well, it was really normal pregnancy until we found out at the ultrasound that we're having twins. But still, it felt like normal. So we were going about normal life up until
they were, it was on a Thursday that they were born, and I remember that Thursday I was in at work, and we actually always went out to eat for lunch on Thursdays. And I remember on our way back to the office with the ladies I worked with, just kind of being like, oh, I feel a little uncomfortable. Maybe it's just because like I ate too much. I was thinking it was more like Braxton Hicks kind of contractions, which I never really had with Kaylin, but I was like, this is twins, so things are gonna feel different. So I finished out work the rest of that day. I was driving home and was having more contractions, and it was concerning me a little bit. And so when I got home, Mitch came pulling in soon after. We were supposed to actually be on worship team that night, both of us for practice. And I told him, you know what, I'm not feeling that great. I'm having some contractions. I think I'm gonna stay home and I'm gonna drink water and I'm gonna put my feet up. And I think that's probably what I need. Which you were a little hesitant. You're like, are you sure? I'm like, yeah, it's fine. I was like, but can you take Kaylin? Because I don't really feel like chasing her around because she was 2 at the time, or almost 2. She wasn't quite 2. So he's like, sure, no problem. So anyway, I just want to kind of tell all this because it's like an awesome testimony of like how the Lord worked things out for us that night. So Mitch took Kaylin with him to worship team practice. And it was really not long after that I had a contraction that really like scared me. So I'm probably starting to cry. And so I was like, what was I thinking? I don't know why I just sent Mitch to go to worship team practice. So I was like, I ended up calling my midwife. She said, okay, you know what, come into the hospital. I'm here. We'll just see, we'll just check you and we'll see what's going on. We'll stop whatever is, has started. So then that's when I was really like, why did I send Mitch away? Because I really didn't feel like driving myself into the hospital. So I was like, well, I'm going to call my mother-in-law, who just lives not even a mile away from us. So I called my mother-in-law. She answered. And she was like, I'll come right away. So she drove me into the hospital. I called Mitch on the way there. I said, hey, your mom's taking me to the hospital. If you can just meet me there, because, I'm having some contractions. So the crazy thing is, he said to me, okay, I'll be right there. He said, did you know that your parents were stopping in tonight during practice? They ended up my dad said to my mom, they went out to eat that night, and he was like, hey, you know what, let's go to worship practice tonight, because at that time we would open it up to the congregation, whoever would want to come and just pray and worship while we were practicing, that they could do that. So my mom said, okay, that sounds good. My dad just feeling like that they wanted to stop in that night. I totally know that was the Lord prompting them to do that, because that worked out perfect. Because Mitch said, do you know that your parents are here at practice? I said, no, I didn't know they were going to do that, but that's awesome. Leave Kaylin with
forgot that. I was trying to think of where
That's
Kaylin
what
went.
Granny always tells that story when she tells.
Yeah.
So here's another cool thing, is we actually, a family that we had went to church with, they actually, was it a year or 2? I can't think of how. I think a year or 2 before our twins were born, they had a daughter that was born, and like Mitch said, the 23 weeks just as considered being viable. They actually had their little girl be born at 23 weeks. So my mom, I can't remember if Donna was there at the church or not, but I know she at least let Donna know right away that I was going into the hospital. Well, I guess actually at that point we didn't know 100% yet that they were going to be born. But Donna knew right away what to start praying for, because obviously they had been through something like this before. So Mitch meets me in triage, And pretty much as soon as he got to triage, like they called
Yeah, so
my
we
name.
I met her there at the hospital, and they called us up to the counter to like the desk, and sat us down and started asking questions about
Well, I actually didn't
insurance
sit
and
down.
like all
I
this
was like,
stuff.
I don't want to sit.
And I was thinking like, I feel like we should be like hurrying this along. I feel like this is kind of an emergency. And then all of a sudden Heather's water broke while she was standing right there, and we were sitting at the desk. And the lady at the desk was like, at that point, all of a sudden realized what was happening, and she was like, oh my word, okay. And so she like runs over, and they get her a wheelchair, and they put Heather in the wheelchair, and we were like, that like started like the flurry of that evening. Yeah, so
Yeah. I mean, they took me back into bed at triage. That's when Sherry, my midwife, was there, and I know she looked at me and said, "Heather, you know your water broke, so that means that the babies have to be born." And I said, "Yeah, I know." And I remember just thinking, like, this is too early. like we only literally found out 5 weeks ago that we're having twins, that we're having two babies, and I'm like, now I don't even know if we're gonna have one. But she was like, so we're going to check you, see where the first baby's at. Since she's a midwife, they actually had to call the doctor that was on call. So yeah, by the time, this was like the crazy thing too, is by the time Dr. May, the doctor who delivered them, got the why can't I think? I don't want to say text. It's not texting. Beeped, or with the little beeper. Anyway, by the time she got the call to come in, and by the time that they were born by C-section, I think she said it was like 45 minutes, which is pretty amazing. Like, because they have to get the OR room ready and all that stuff. Plus, you have your like the whole NICU team that has to get ready. So when Sherry checked me, like we said, he was baby A. He was the first one. She said, Heather, like the first baby, his head is like, I mean, we didn't know it was a boy. His head is like right there. You were like complete and ready to go. So yeah, I remember feeling the urge to like push a few times, but I knew that I really couldn't do that. And I think that was also the Lord too, because I feel like that all kind of like subsided. Yeah, I just remember being super scared, and everything felt so out of control. Mitch was calling our family to tell them that the babies were coming. And yeah, since it was an emergency C-section, they looked at Mitch and said, sorry, you can't come back to the OR room. You have to stay outside. Because they just had to put me under. Like, obviously, we didn't have time for an epidural to kick in. Like, we needed this to happen, like, right now.
So there I was, standing outside of the operating room, and I remember standing there with Heather's midwife, and we were just like looking in the crack of the little sliver window. Again, this whole thing is like such a flurry, and there's people going everywhere. There's people coming and going, and yeah, certainly like a helpless place to be in. You know, just standing outside. While your wife and new babies are, in all the midst of that chaos, it felt like. So they started the operation, like Heather said, it was a C-section because the babies were so early and so young. They do a C-section because there's concern that the babies can't handle the trauma of being birthed. So they did an emergency C-section. They pulled Jaren out first. So Jaren is the oldest by about 2 seconds or so. And almost immediately next, they pulled Tegan out. And I remember seeing just a glimpse of these wee little people as they lifted her up off, basically out of Heather. But they weren't breathing, and so they immediately took them and had to intubate them. So they put them breathing machine basically into them to help them breathe and get going.
Because at 25 weeks, like your lungs aren't working. Like,
Right.
like that's when I remember one of the first things I was thinking when I first saw them is like they have all of their parts. They have everything that they need at 25 weeks. They have everything there, tiny as can be, and like those last 3 months is just for everything to start to mature. So all of your organs and everything to mature. So at that point, like 25-week lungs aren't supposed to be breathing on their own.
Right.
Like they had to be intubated because that's the only way their lungs were going to breathe.
Right. So then, of course, Heather was under anesthesia. So they wheel her out of the room and they say, "Hey, Dad, come with us because we don't have time to do all the normal banding identification of the babies." And so they said, "You need to come with us and just stay with us while we're taking these babies because we're going straight to the NICU." So I remember following, they have these teeny little beds that they were wheeling them in. And we went straight to the NICU, and they brought me a stool, and they set the stool right in between these two isolettes, they call them. And again, like a whole team of people, like in a flurry, like busily working on these babies, trying to get them settled in, trying to get them breathing right, trying to get their vitals stabilized. And there I was just sitting on a stool. Again, like nothing I could possibly do, and I couldn't even be there with Heather because she was still asleep. But I wasn't allowed to leave because they said I needed to stay there as validation of who the babies were because they weren't identified yet. So, yeah, what a crazy night.
I think probably all of that was probably more, I don't know if I want to use the word traumatizing, but I remember that next morning asking Mitch if he's okay, because I remember like this look on your face of just saying that you're just like, Pat, I mean, everything that happened last night, that was crazy. And I remember this would have been weeks later after they were born because we were in the NICU all the time while they were there, and seeing another family come in with very young babies too. They were twins as well, and they actually I think might have been 23 weeks. But I remember seeing the whole scenario played out of the dad standing there and everybody else just like working around him. I could hear the dad actually under his breath. It sounded like he was like singing hymns. But I was like, oh, that's what Mitch went through that night. Like, I mean, just a totally different, obviously, scenario than it was for me. I remember then once I woke up, my mom was there, and she right away said, the babies are okay. They are stable. You have a boy and you have a girl, which I was like, I knew it. Which I have to say, I always wanted twins. I always wanted a boy and girl. So, and then soon after that, Mitch was there and my dad was there. And we were all crying, and I remember my dad saying, when you guys called and told me the babies were coming, I just fell to my knees, and I was like, this can't be happening because this is too soon, it's too soon. But he said, on my drive here, I just kept hearing the Lord say, everything's going to be okay, they're going to be okay. So it really was like, it literally, that evening, the night that they were born, I would say that night we literally had people all around the world like praying for us. I have a sister and brother-in-law that work with Youth with a Mission, and so they know lots of people all over the world, and as soon as they heard they had people praying, somebody had started this blog for us, and it was really cool. There was a map that they put up so that people could say where they were at praying, and it literally was like peppered with everybody around the world, which was super humbling for Mitch and I, that it's like, wow, we literally have people like the church like on their knees for our babies, like the Lord is using our babies to like unify the body of Christ, to like get on their knees and pray. So yeah, we once we were in there, we were in for 5 days in the hospital. we got to stay the whole 5 days because of my C-section and obviously them being in the NICU. But doctors coming back and forth always saying, this is going to be touch and go for a while, and you're going to have good days and you're going to have really bad days, for the next 3 months, because obviously 3 months would get them to their due date. You're hearing this and you feel a tad bit discouraged and you're like, we have to do this for 3 months. Yeah. But really, the Lord worked a miracle on them. We really didn't have any days that were super terrible. It was a very steady stay in the NICU, and no doubt it's because of the miracle that the Lord works in their lives.
I feel like this story is just so full of the Lord's miraculous hand, and I think the one thing that I realized, and Heather and I talked about this often, is that there was the realization of even the miracle that's happening when life is created, in the womb, and all that is happening there, that is happening naturally and without even thought. But to recreate that takes a full staff 24/7 in a state-of-the-art facility to try to recreate what's happening naturally in a mother as she's carrying a baby. And it just was a fascinating realization. But yeah, it just it was lots and lots of miracles that the Lord's hand was on our whole journey there. So we spent the next 3 months basically in and out of the NICU. So the kids Jaron and Tegan were obviously in the NICU, but Heather and I, after those 5 days, had to go home. And so we were going back and forth from our house to the hospital. I would leave to go to work early, so I could leave work a little bit early, and then I'd go right to the hospital and spend a few hours there with Heather and the baby and Jaron and Tegan. And
we had family that were awesome, that were taking care of Kaylin. She did amazing for early being 2, and her whole world kind of getting turned upside down. A little funny story, she was a very early talker, and the weekend that we were in there, like I said, they were going on Thursday, so we were there from Thursday to Monday in the hospital. And so when she would have to come in to see Mitch and I and the babies in the hospital, and then Mitch took her to go do something. Actually, our mall is really close.
The cafeteria.
Yeah. Oh, you went to the cafeteria. Yeah. I thought you took him over to Park City. I thought you went to the mall.
The cafeteria.
Or he took her to the cafeteria. And on their way back to the room, he said she looked up at him and said, "Daddy, I don't want to live here." And he said, "Oh, I don't want to live here either. We're not going to live here. This isn't where we're living."
We
kind of felt like we were living there.
Like that, right?
But bless her heart, this little 2-year-old that's I don't want to live here. But she did amazingly well. Because our family was awesome at taking care of her, and she would come in and visit sometimes, which all the nurses always liked her visits. And I should actually go get, I have a little diaper and a hat that they wore, but they would give these teeny tiny preemie diapers to Kaylin to go home and take home to put on her doll babies, and they literally fit better on her doll babies than they did on Jaron Tegan's little.
How small these babies are is crazy. We have some pictures, I think we'll have to show them, of Jaron has my wedding band is on his arm, up here around his arm. And my wedding band is on
Tegan's arm. Yeah. So literally, well, actually I need her whole arm, hand and arm was could fit in that. So yeah, we obviously, like Mitch was saying, it's crazy what a woman and a mom's body is just doing for your baby as they're growing in the womb. I think probably one of the hardest things for me as a mom, days that we would go in there and they would say, "Oh, we had to start them on a round of antibiotics today because they're fighting infections." And I remember the one time just looking at Mitch, and I was in tears. I was just they shouldn't have to be doing that. They need, if they were in me, I would be doing that for them. I would be fighting that. They wouldn't even be getting an infection. So that was probably one of the hardest things for me is when it works. They actually still have scars. I know that you have one that you're not going to be able to see it, but like this scar here is from you getting pricked so much because they're drawing blood all the time. You're checking things. They had to have several blood transfusions. They actually had surgeries at 2 weeks old on their hearts. So like when we say it was smooth sailing, it was, I mean, there was still stuff like that was going on.
It was a hard climb, but it was a steady climb. And I think that was like one of the blessings about our story is that like, I think most NICU stays have some periods of like maybe steep or even long decline. Mm-hmm. And for us, it was, like I said, it was a hard climb, but it was pretty steady, and we just kept on climbing.
And one of the biggest things, it was their feeding, and the one doctor, the one neonatologist, he would always be very excited when we would come in to tell us like if they got bumped up on their feeds, because pretty much that's how it was. Either they got bumped up or they kind of stayed there at what they were at. They never had to go back down, which reason he's like, I know I'm always talking to you about their feeds, but that is actually, I mean, that's what they need, because we need everything to grow, and that's how they grow, is by their feeds. And so like their little guts just need to be stimulated. And I remember actually one nurse saying the one time, she's like, it really is a miracle that like their feedings are going so well, because this just doesn't usually happen like this.
So we had a friend of ours is a photographer, and he offered to come in and take pictures of our journey. And so we had put together a book, and we'll show you some pictures here in the video, but you can see how teeny tiny, that's Tegan's little hand on there. So we'll show you some of the pictures from the book here, but yeah, quite a journey. But
and I actually, when we were thinking about doing this video the other day, I actually maybe Mitch could put the link to it in like the comments or something. But like I told you, a friend had started this blog for us, so she would give updates on it, and then she like turned it over to me to do it. And I looked that up the other day. I couldn't remember what it was called. I just put in Schellenberger twins, and it got brought up. So I don't know if any of you would find it interesting. Like, I mean, that really kind of gives you the details of kind of day-to-day stuff of what was going on. Yeah. If anybody's interested, or if there's anyone that is going through something like this, that you could go back and look at that blog and hopefully find encouragement from it. Yeah,
we thought we just wanted to, part of the reason why I wanted to share a story is to be a testimony of, and give you guys hope that might be dealing with a similar situation or in a similar place, because here we are 14 years later.
And they're doing things like running cross country.
Right, Jaron and Tegan cross country.
You know,
they're involved with the theater. For 7 weeks, their lungs
didn't even work on their own. Like, they were on a ventilator for 7 weeks, and they got to move on to the CPAP, and then eventually they're nasal cannulas. And they actually had to come home. This was another awesome answer to prayer for us. Lots of people were telling us, okay, most times twins do not go home at the same time, just because they're progressing at different rates. They're like, so don't plan on them going home at the same time. And I remember saying, Lord, I would really like if they could come home at the same time, because then, like, you're still having to run into the NICU because you have a baby in the NICU, so you're bringing your other baby along with you because, you know, you need to be feeding them and stuff like that. So that was really a prayer of mine, that they had come home at the same time, and they did. They both had to come home on oxygen and monitors, but by 90 days in the hospital, when they said, we can send you home if you're okay with the oxygen monitors, we were like, yes, let's do it. So they taught us how to do all that. So they came home in November. November 4th was the day that they came home. So it was actually like 2 weeks before their due date. And then it was around May when they were fully weaned off of the oxygen. Now, they weren't on oxygen, like we said, they were weaned. So, I mean, at first they were on it 24/7, and then, you know, they eventually got bumped back until they didn't need it anymore. But that was interesting too, bringing babies home that were all hooked up to tanks and tubes, and we had things strung everywhere in the living room. We also have a 2-year-old that was running around at the time, so, you know, you want to kind of keep things out of her way. So yeah, that was like we said, we joked around, we said, like, after Jaden was born, I was like, oh wow, this feels so easy. We're just bringing this baby home without anything attached to him.
Right. So we had 3 very, very different birthing stories. Kaylin was very normal. It was the like, our bags are packed, waiting, driving to the hospital, I think it's time kind of thing. And then of course Jared and Tegan were like a very scary emergency. And then with Jaden, we had a scheduled C-section, and so it felt like
I wasn't
very
allowed
calm.
I wasn't allowed to try and be back after the twins. The way they had to do my C-section, they didn't want me going into any kind of labor. So they actually, I was being monitored, like I was being checked a lot when I was pregnant with him, because we didn't actually necessarily know why I went into preterm labor. It was twins, but to go into labor that early isn't typical. So they were just really watching me closely. And then at 36 weeks and like 5 days is when they did my C-section with him, which we were a little, I understand why they had to do it, but I'm just saying to any pregnant mom out there, like, be super grateful, even like that you go the full 40 weeks. Like, the Lord made it a full 40 weeks for a reason. We just laughed because once he was born, like, the nurses kept saying, like, they were remember they were checking his. What were they checking? I'm trying to remember for 24, like the first 24 hours. I forget what all they were checking, because they're like, since he's premature, which we were like.
He's not premature.
He's not premature, like, compared to what we went through before. But they were like, why did they take him at like 4 weeks early? So we always had to explain. But even at 4 weeks early, there's just stuff that they have to make sure is happening and checking. So, like, you can do it. You can make it the 40 weeks. Be grateful for that. Because, the Lord intended it that way for a reason.
For sure. I mean, again, we talked about the miracle of life and a baby growing in the mom, and one of the other things that stood out to me as like so fascinating and miraculous is our God-given ability to learn and intellect, to study and develop the procedures and the equipment and the technology that was part of the reason why their stay in the NICU was so successful. I mean, it's crazy the things that the teeny tiny size of the things that
I'll be right back.
that they need to work on babies this small. I can't remember what Tegan or Jaren had a PIC line, which means it's a central IV line. So they actually had a small teeny tiny tube that they fed in a vein in her hand all the way up into her heart, and that's like a tube like the size of a hair, and it's just. It's pretty crazy.
They were supposed to both have PIC lines, remember, but they could never get Jaren's. Remember,
right,
they could never get a PIC line.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
I was gonna say this is actually. I'm gonna see if you can see that.
Those are the diapers that like.
Yeah, this is the teeny tiny little diapers that Jaren and Tegan wore for the first few weeks they were born. I mean, like, it's like, look.
Right.
I mean, like, cell phones are bigger than this. And this was actually a little hat that Tegan wore. Like, look at that. Just
we
to
were
kind of put
joking
things in
because
perspective.
this stuff fit better on, or maybe you said
that's what I
it fit
said,
better
on
on
dolls.
Kaylin's dolls than it did on Jaren and Tegan because they were so teeny tiny. But like I said, we have lots of pictures of our stay in there. We'll show you them on the video. It's just, quite a miracle. To have these guys here, not just like alive and with us, but healthy and flourishing. It's awesome. Jaren's name means to sing out, and you think of these like teeny tiny little lungs that weren't even working, and now he's in chorus, and he's we talked about it in a different video, but he was in an honors chorus and is part of theater. Tegan's name means attractive, and I mean, look at her. She's like a testimony of that, and she's just like so beautiful, and it's just such a blessing. To have them here with such a scary and unsure start.
It's great to have all 4 of you, obviously.
Yeah. Yeah. We are super blessed. Heather and I talk about how ideal and awesome it is to have 4 kids, 2 boys, 2 girls. The boys are 2 years apart, the girls are 2 years apart, but they alternate girl, boy, girl, boy. So you can have to figure that little riddle out how that works. But obviously it's because the middle 2 are twins. So it's
Here's
yeah.
another thing that was cool. Well, first of all, I should say we when we decided we were ready to start a family, it took us about 1.5 years to get pregnant with Kaylin, which I know isn't like forever. There's some people that are waiting longer. But you know, of course, when we first thought we were we were going to start a family, we didn't want to say anything to our parents or our siblings because you know we wanted this to be a really big surprise when we told them we were pregnant. Well, then after a while, it just was feeling. Yeah, I just remember saying to Mitch, I want to tell our parents that we're trying because I just really want them to be praying for us. And so I remember when I told my parents and they prayed for us that night. And afterwards, my dad said, I just feel like that the Lord just said, don't be surprised if there's more than one. And I was like, oh, I wonder if that means twins. Of course, then we got pregnant with Kaylin, which was awesome. And actually my twin sister was also pregnant. And then my sister-in-law, my brother's sister, also got pregnant. So then I was like, I bet that's what the Lord meant. Like he was specifically talking to Chief, who you met, I think it was the videos, that's my dad's grandpa's name. It was like a word more for him that he's gonna have like more than one grandbaby born within just a few months of each other. But then once our twins were actually born, I remembered that word that my dad gave. And I was like, no, you know what? That was supposed to be for our twins. And I also think that the Lord, you know, years before they were born, gave my dad that word so that we could specifically like hang on to that as a promise that like don't be surprised if there's more than one. And yeah, like he spoke that like years before they came so that we could be remembering that, just to continue to know that like, okay, God has this all in control. So yeah, that was cool. And I also remember him saying, you just watch, Jaron, he's gonna be a big guy. And you know, now he's like way taller than me and eating us out of house and home. So just kidding. And we like to feed you. I'm glad to feed you. So yeah.
All right, so that's a little bit more of our story. We just thought it'd be cool to share it because it's Prematurity Awareness Month. It is November now. It may not be November when you're watching this video.
It's like November 29th.
Right.
So.
But yeah, we just wanted to share a little bit more of our story to be a blessing and to be give you guys some hope for the families that are in this situation. That these guys are a testimony of the Lord's hand at work, and yeah, lots of miracles.
God is good.
Mm-hmm.